Hi folks, Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network, coming to you for yet another Sunday session. This time we're talking to you about securing a killer deal, the vendor pain points that you'll have. Sorry, I don't think I was actually sharing my screen, but there we go. So securing a killer deal, vendor pain points and how to solve them. Lots of really good information in this session today. So let's get on with the show, shall I? Hang on 2 seconds. I've just hit the wrong button. So 2 secs. Let's get on with the show. So let's keep it really simple. I guess the number of times that we actually go into a deal and we put ourselves first, okay? So that the biggest pain point that we found this killer deal, and all we want to do is actually convince the vendor that we want to get the deal on our terms. We want to get it at a rock bottom price, and it should be really simple, okay? But the problem is that when we go into these negotiations, half the time the thing just doesn't go to plan. They debunk us, they shut us down in 2 seconds flat, and they just kick us out the door. And we wonder what the hell happened as we walk out with our tail between our legs, okay? And the problem is that we've been putting our needs first and not the vendor's needs. So instead, what we need to do is actually start to, I guess, talk to the vendors and understand what are their pain points, what are their issues, what are their challenges, and listen to their needs, okay? Actually have a conversation. And what we'll often find is that the issues and challenges that they've actually got, our solution is going to be somewhere close to it, or we might have a number of other solutions that we can rummage around our kit bag, which might give us a very similar outcome, solve their needs, and in the process also solve ours, okay? But too often we just does the deal stack, how much money am I going to get? And we just force it down. And so when we start to do that, when we only have one tool in our kit bag, and that tool happens to be a hammer, then everything starts looking like a nail, and we just start slamming that into the vendor, and no wonder they run away, I guess, in pain. So I guess my word of advice, okay? My word of advice is this is a people business, okay? We happen to transact property, but we're dealing with people all day, every day. And so you need to get good at your people skills, which means understand their needs, have conversations with them, and then understand that there are many, many ways to skin the cat, okay? So let's keep it really simple, okay? We want to make it all about them, not about us, okay? We want to make them the focus of all of our attention, and we want to make sure that we can actually help them or demonstrate that we are helping them in actually solving their needs. And if we take the time to do that, then what we'll find is very often the very idea that we want to have them walk away with, they will actually propose to us, okay? So we've positioned it in a way that it becomes their idea, not our idea. And as soon as it becomes their idea, it's really simple to actually move forward in there. Now, in all instances where you're doing negotiations, you want to make sure that your reputation is king. You want to be honest, you want to be upfront, you want to have lots of integrity, and you want to have these conversations in a way that is not bullish at like bull at a gate. Instead, it's want to be more conversational in style. Okay, now let's have a think about when we go into start to negotiate. I guess the ideal outcome is to actually be talking directly with the vendor. Quite often we've got an agent that sits in the middle. So in this instance, I'm just going to make this conversation about the fact that we've either convinced the agent to get us in front of them, or we have, I guess, rustled up this deal all by ourselves, either through letterbox drops or door knocking or other ways where we've done this, and we're actually negotiating directly face to face with the vendor. Okay, so that's the precursor for the majority of this conversation. Now, there are other presentations that we've done where we talk about how to get through the agent in order to get to the vendor. Let's just take that for granted at this point in time. So first of all, we're sitting at the kitchen table with somebody. We need to actually understand, who are we talking to? Is this actually the decision maker, or is this what I'm going to call the scout? So the scout is somebody who collects data on behalf of the decision maker. They're a forest, they go foresting around and rummaging around to go, well, what is it that these people actually make? And they just waste our time. They're not actually in a position to make the decision. And so what we need to do is either convince that scout to get us directly to the decision maker. So they act as a gatekeeper typically. And, why would I bother my partner, if this deal doesn't even make sense? So how do we do that? Well, we need to make sure that our conversation is when we first have the chat with them is encouraging them to actually come to the table. Okay, so there's a thing called dropping bait. So you want to lay some bait out there that says, well, I'm in a position to actually do a deal. I've got a couple of deals on the go at the moment, and it's going to be the first one that comes to my terms because I can only run one deal at a time. So would be really keen on doing your particular property. I think there's an opportunity where we may be able to pay above market rates, for example. But if you're not in a position to have a serious conversation about it, then I've got a couple of other properties that do. And that it will encourage the decision maker to, I guess, come out and come to the table so that you're actually dealing with them at the same time. Now, the scout may still be there. That's okay. You can have both of them there. But what we really want is the decision maker there, because when you've got the decision maker, then you've truly got the ability to negotiate back and forth, because you know what some of the issues and challenges are that you're going to be dealing with. Now, where to negotiate? Now, I touched on it before. The kitchen table is a fantastic place. The most critical thing I can say is never negotiate over the phone, email, or text. Okay, we really want to be face to face as much as humanly possible. What that's going to allow us to do, it's going to allow us to have eye contact. We can actually see what they're happening. We can build trust and rapport, and it's going to make it much easier for us to actually read their body language and observe their body language. You get small, subtle cues just with somebody's eyes darting around the room, or when they're looking at their partner with a little look like that. You can tell when you're close to the deal. But when you're doing it over the phone or via email, you don't get any of those visual clues as to what's actually going on. You also don't get the subtlety of the conversation, which is not just about the words. It's about the whole body language and the rapport. You build rapport by doing all sorts of things over and above just the language. Okay, it's the tonality of your voice. It's matching their languaging. It's matching their seating positions, all sorts of things like that, which I will actually touch on a little later in the presentation. So, before we walk into the person's property, so we want to. I'm going to say person's property in this particular instance, but we want to meet them face to face. It could be at a coffee shop, somewhere non-threatening, or it could be in their home. But we want to meet face to face. Now, if we are able to get into their home, that is fantastic. And the reason why it's fantastic is we get all of these extra visual clues. We get to look around their property. We can see how well they've kept the property. We can see, I guess, the photos on the wall, and is that a giant fish that they're holding, or is that their grandkids that they're cuddling? You start to, maybe they've got sporting trophies or things like that. Maybe they've got a particular football team or sporting code that they follow, and there's posters on the wall, things like that. So what they are, they're conversation starters. As you go in, you go, oh, I didn't realize you go fishing. Or, hey, how many grandkids have you actually got? Those sorts of things allow you to break the ice and build rapport and that sort of thing. When you go to neutral ground, so if you're going to a coffee shop and that sort of thing, you can still have those conversations, but you've got no visual clues as to which ones to start. And so sometimes we can ask 3 or 4 dead-end questions when we're at a coffee shop or at neutral ground and have no idea that, I don't have any grandkids or no, I don't do any sport, or, so you can kill yourself really quickly. But if you happen to be able to do it in the home, then that's going to give you, I guess, a great place to actually pick up on those cues as you go in. Now, in saying that, we are always, irrespective of where we're going to meet them, we are going to do our homework, not only on the deal, which is incredibly important, but we're also going to do our homework on the people that we're actually going to be talking to. So we're going to Facebook stalk them and things like that. So firstly, the homework on the deal, most important. Okay, make sure that you've done your site analysis, your yields, your zonings, your overlays, your critical constraints, what the highest and best use is. your feasibility. Know all of those things off the top of your head. Now, you don't need to have, I guess, put an offer on the table day one. You don't know where it's going to go, but you need to be prepared that it could go in all sorts of direction. And the reason for that is that there are all sorts of people that you actually negotiate with. So some people need super detail, and you have to give them all the warts and all to give them the feeling that you actually are a person of substance. Other people are very high level and they don't want any of that. But if you're not prepared before you go in, then you won't be able to flex within the conversation in order to actually do that. So make sure you're prepared, make sure you do all of that homework up front. You need to understand also your deal parameters and what you can and can't live without, okay? What is the product going to be built, What, we're going to be selling off the plan? Are you going to be selling finished product? What are the projected profits? All of that stuff, you need to know that like the back of your hand when you go in for a negotiation, okay? What the comparable recent sales are of the raw site, which is what you're buying typically, and also of the finished product and what that is actually going to look like, because almost certainly they're going to say that, Joe down the road sold his property for blah, blah, blah. And if you don't have those comparables to hand, you won't be able to go, yeah, but Joe had this extra zoning and didn't have this critical constraint, and that's why it got the extra value. So you need to be able to be prepared for all of that and be able to do that on the fly and appear to be the most knowledgeable person in the room without being a smartass. Now, you also need to do homework on the other side. Understand, are they investors? Are they developers? Are they homeowners? You can do a whole bunch of research on Google. You can do a whole bunch of research on Facebook. You can do a whole bunch of research on LinkedIn, on your sales portals. So I guess your National Property Data, your Price Finder, your RP Data, those sales portals, you can do all sorts of things to understand whether it's an investor property or a principal place of residence. Understand, are they buying or selling somewhere else at the same time? Is it just this one property that you're talking about, or are they selling down everything, in which case you want to get to understand why that's the case? Or have they purchased somewhere else before selling? There's all sorts of things like that. Or if they were to buy somewhere else, how and where would that be? So try and understand all of that work. Now, also understand where they work. What do they do for a living? Again, they're conversation starters. All this homework is going to be your ability to go in there and talk to them and have, I guess, openings to your conversations so that it feels natural when you sit in there. Otherwise, that's going to be very challenging to know how to navigate the conversation. Where you can, understand their family status. Are they married? Are they deceased? Not them deceased, maybe their spouse is deceased. Do they have kids, grandkids, those sorts of things? You would be surprised at how much information is just publicly available if you do the appropriate Google searches or if you do the appropriate Facebook or LinkedIn searches and the like. So you can find out a heck of a lot of information about people wherever humanly possible. Understand their, I guess, their dress code if you can. So if they're going to be a professional worker and wear suits into the office all the time, then you want to be dressed pretty sharp when you go there as well and make sure that you're looking the part. If they're a tradie, then you might want to dress down a little bit and not come across too smarmy and too, I guess, different to their particular style. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable around you, okay? Which means that you have to start to be a little bit of a chameleon and start to fit in with them. Now, once you get to the point where you've done all this homework, you're sitting down, you're starting to have some conversations, the point of the conversations is to understand what are their drivers, okay? So what are the things that are actually motivating them to be in a position to be talking to you right here, right now? Now, there are three drivers that you want to start to capture all of the different issues and challenges in the conversation, and they're ways that you want to navigate your conversation where you can. So fears, pains, and desires. So fears, pains, desires. They're the three areas that you want to start to understand when you're having a conversation. Where if you can start to elicit some of that out, they are going to be either objection points or potentially opportunities for you to present your solution to them that alleviates their fear, solves one of their pains, or enables them to execute one of their desires. So, as many of those that you can actually capture along the way are going to be massive opportunity for you to say, well, see, I have been listening and I'm paying attention, and what it is that we've actually got here for you, I think is going to help you in all these different areas, which is then going to go, oh, okay, that's actually quite attractive. And, given that the initial hesitation that I had in actually selling, maybe you can solve a lot of my challenges here. So wouldn't that be attractive? So let's talk about, I'll just give you, now there's hundreds of fears and hundreds of pains and hundreds of desires, and every single person is going to be unique and different, but let's just kind of spitball a couple of them out there so that you've got some ideas on the kind of things to start looking for. So let's talk to fears to start with, okay? So maybe they're fearing that they won't have enough money to retire. Okay, so when you capture the fear, when you hear that in the conversation, make sure you make a point of actually writing that down on a notepad, okay? They will see that you're paying attention, they'll note that it's there, and then later on you can start to use that as a checklist, okay? You can go, well, you mentioned before that you're a little bit worried about not having any money to retire. If I was able to offer you a solution that gave you a little bit more money that would help you out significantly in that regard, would that be of interest to you? Okay, so we're going to repeat their fear back to them. That demonstrates that we heard it, B, we understood it, and C, that the solution that we want to offer them is going to do everything that we can to actually attempt that. So that's one fear potentially. They might fear that we're going to rip them off. They might think that shady developers can't be trusted. Well, this whole process that we're trying to do is demonstrating the exact opposite of that. We're actually building trust, we're building rapport, we're doing all the things. So when you hear that, you need to take extra time in going through this. You need to potentially consider maybe we should do an open book offer where you can actually show them the feasibility and they can actually see the hard numbers. Yes, they know that you're making money, but they need to understand that making money is your business, that is your job. And if they can see that they've got fair market price and they're leaving some money on the table for you, then it's a nice even playing field. Okay. Sometimes they might have a fear where they don't like agents. Well, this is a perfect opportunity to say, well, in this instance, why have an agent involved if you don't need to? You can deal directly with me. That means no agent's commissions being paid, and that means more cash in your pocket because the commission won't actually come out. Now, what's really important is when you're capturing these fears, pains, and desires, that not only do you capture the pain point, but you also, when you start to present your benefit a little bit later, it's not just the benefit, but it's a thing called the benefit of the benefit. Okay, so if they don't like agents, well, the benefit is, well, they won't have to pay agents commission. Well, the benefit of that benefit is that means more money in their pocket. Okay, so you want to be able to present the benefit of the benefit back to them to say, okay, you said before that you don't like agents. If we deal directly, there won't be any agents comms. That means more money in your pocket. And that should be able to elevate your conversation a little bit higher. So a few more fears that might be out there. This is their one chance to cash in and they want to make the most of it. They might have been living in that property for 20 years, 30 years. They've got time on their hands. If they can be a little bit flexible with their terms, maybe you can bump up the price point for them. That might alleviate some of your holding costs. And so if you were going to pay the holding costs to land tax, and you're going to pay the holding costs to the bank, and you're going to pay holding costs to council for rates and all those sorts of things, why not siphon that out and say, well, it would have been a cost to my project anyway. If they don't make me pay for the property up front and we can do a delayed settlement, maybe I can just pass that back to them at a later point in time. Okay, so that gives them, that is their one chance to cash in, and that helps them with their extra money that they need to retire and a few other things like that. Okay, So many times we're going to hear these fears and when we're actually going to have a solution. Okay. There are other times when we're going to hear some fears and we won't be able to offer a solution that fits our requirements. And it's important to recognize and capture that, because if you try to brute force your way through that, it's not going to work. So for example, their health may not be good and they don't really want the added stress of staying in the deal until the end, because it's, it's just going to add woes to them that they've already got. Now, when you hear a situation like that, this is where a short, sharp sale is probably going to be what you're after. So you may be able to get a really crisp price if you can give them certainty and clarity, because they don't want the headache of this. So make sure you understand, it's not just hey, I can negotiate really long terms. Sometimes it's okay, well, I'll give you the terms you're after, but that's going to reflect in a sharper price point. So that's just some examples of some fears that might be able to help you. So let's talk about some pains. Okay, so they might have a few pain points that they've got at the moment. So their mortgage payments might be too high at the moment and they can't actually keep their repayments going. Well, maybe there's an opportunity where instead of purchasing the property off them outright, maybe you could say, well, I'll give you a delayed settlement, but why don't I pay your mortgage for 12 months? That's going to help you massively. It means that you're not going to have to go get the loan yourself. There's no credit rating for you, those sorts of things. It's going to massively improve your cash flow. And chances are, while their payments might be too high for them, the level of that mortgage is probably lower than the actual price, the value of the property. So if you had gone and got a mortgage for the property, then chances are you would have been paying a little bit more in interest. So it's a great win-win type scenario. We can come up with things like that. So some other pains, can't look after such a large property. Once upon a time, having the big backyard when we had all the kids was fantastic. But now that we're getting older, that big backyard's a pain in the bum to mow, and I'm getting a little bit rickety in my knees, and I don't really like pushing the lawnmower and all those sorts of things. Maybe this is an opportunity to say, well, we can simplify your life and help you to downscale and things like that. Okay. Maybe their pain point is they don't yet have anywhere to move. Well, that's simple. You can say, well, what if we gave you flexible settlement timelines and gave you the certainty of how much money you're going to be getting, but in exchange for that, we're going to that's going to give you some time to go and find where you want to go. So you've got plenty of time, exactly how much to spend. And we'll just, you might say that's 3 months, you might say 6, you might even say 12, depending upon how flexible you need to be and how quickly they actually need to move on. Okay, so it could be that their pain point is that they're getting older and they can't upkeep the maintenance of the property. And that could be because maybe the property is an old weatherboard and needs lots of paint, and the stairs always need staining and all sorts, like lots of heartache to do that. Maybe what they're really looking for is something that's a little bit lower maintenance. There's not as much weeding in the garden. And so maybe there's an opportunity to say, well, what if we could help you to stay in the area and we could build something new for you here, right here. Okay, and that comes down to the next one, which is the desires. Okay, so I said fears, pains, and desires. So some example desires, they may want more money in their pocket. Okay, well, if we heard a fear and a pain before, and we hear a desire that matches, then what we want to do is reflect the fear in a way that we can actually present the desire. Okay, so some other desires, they may want to leave something for their children. Okay, so and that's great when you're in their property and you can see the picture of the grandkids and you've had that conversation about them. Now we actually understand what that's about, and we can present that solution back to them in a way that reflects that. So, okay, well, if we were able to give you a little bit more money for the deal, if some flexible terms, we could pay you back the holding costs that we actually saved. Wouldn't that leave a little bit more money for you to leave for your children, or set them up for a deposit for their own house, that sort of thing? So we're just going to play it back to them in a way that they're really going to like and appreciate. Some other desires, they might want to go on a holiday. Well, maybe you want to do delayed settlement early access. Why don't you just pay for their holiday while you're digging up their backyard, or while you're doing some work on their property? They could be cruising around the Bahamas or somewhere in Europe or something like that on your dime, and you've basically given them $10,000 or $15,000 early to say, well, go on that holiday. We'll just consider that as part payment for the project. It means that you don't have to deal with a headache while we're making all the mess here. Okay. Some other desires, their friends and family all live in the area. They don't want to move out of the area. They've been living here for 20, 30 years. They love it. Why would they want to move on? Well, this is a perfect opportunity to say, well, what if we were to actually create a product that was exactly what you wanted, and you could downscale your the maintenance issues that you've got. You can downscale the backyard issues that you've got and that sort of thing, and we can build you a property right next door to where you were. Maybe it's the backyard, maybe we're going to knock the house down and do something there, and potentially we can deal with their next desire is somewhere where they can age in place. And we say, well, what if we made it all ground floor so there's no stairs, so that later on in life you're not having to worry about that? And what if we made it so that the doorways were a little bit wider, so that if you ever get to the point where you're walking with a frame, or maybe you need a wheelchair at some point later in life, you don't have to worry about those things. It's just going to be so much easier for you to actually go and age in place. Okay. So that's what we're trying to listen for, is those fears, pains, and desires. And hopefully you've got a couple of example ones there to think about. What I would encourage you to do is a little bit of homework. Many of you may have heard of this gentleman. His name is Maslow. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow mapped out 5 different layers in a pyramid where as humans, we need to solve these certain elements in our life before we start moving up the stack. So physiological needs, air, food, water, shelter, clothing, reproduction, that sort of thing is generally at the bottom layer. So we can't do anything unless we've got those physiological needs actually solved. Then it goes into safety needs. So personal security, employment, resources, health, property, that sort of stuff. And then it moves up to love and belonging. So friendship, intimacy, friends and connections. Then it moves up again to self-esteem, so we're respect and status and recognition. And then the last one is self-actualization. So when you start to have your conversations with people, you're going to start to pick, where is this person on the pyramid? Okay, they're at the point where they're at safety needs. So your conversations are going to rummage around in there to go, okay, well, how's your health going? And have you got somewhere to move to? And what's your employment status? And so you can rummage around in the right area to get those fears, pains, and desires out. Okay. Now, remember that whatever it is that they're actually talking to you about, whatever you uncover is generally just the tip of the iceberg. There's generally a whole bunch more information that sits under the covers that is hard to unravel. Okay. So a little bit like an iceberg, okay, you've seen the tip of the iceberg above, there's a bucket load of the iceberg below. And so what we want to do is, when we kind of see a hint of one of those fears, pains, and desires, and if we want to drill down into what exactly is actually capturing that, we want to get under the surface, okay? And in doing that, there's a thing called the 5 whys, okay? So 5 whys is a methodology of actually asking questions where we can elicit responses that go deeper and deeper and deeper into the knowledge of that person. So for example, when you say, hey, I saw a picture of your grandkids there, then they start to talk about that, then you ask a question about their response, okay? So why is that important to you? And then they'll give you a response, and you go, why is that important? Why did that lead to that outcome? And if you drill down 5 levels where question, response, question on the response, question on that response, et cetera, you'll drill down typically all the way into the root issue. So those fears, pains, and desires, you'll actually capture generally what's actually happening there. Now, really important to understand that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So we should be listening twice as much as we're actually talking. Too many times we want to be looking important, and we want to be sending out the message that, this is all about us. But it's not, it's actually about them, okay? And so we want to ask them a whole bunch of things that are going to allow them to talk more. And the best way to do that is ask open-ended questions, okay? So can you tell me why you're buying or selling? Okay, nice open-ended question. And they'll answer the question, and then you do the 5 whys, okay? So why is that important to you? Or why did you come to that decision? Or where are you going to go with that? Or, you know, to drill down into where is that going to go? So another open-ended question might be, why would I choose to buy or why would I choose to buy or sell to you? Okay. Is there any other reason why we should not be buying or selling today? Okay. Those sorts of things. How can I make this clearer for you? So when you go, I think I've presented my solution. If they don't quite understand, how can I make this clearer for you? So these open-ended conversations that allow the opportunity for them to ponder and respond with detail, okay? And we want to, again, drill into the detail of their response by asking further questions. Always listen for objections, always, okay? So we're trying to write down the fears, pains, and desires, but we're listening really hard for a clear objection. We want to write it down, be seen to be writing it down. That later on allows us to have a tick, okay? So, and you can play it back to them. So repeat their answer back to them in a way. So if I was able to solve that problem for you today, would you be in a position to move forward? So if I was able to resolve, insert problem, would you be in a position to move forward today? And what you're looking for is a yes, okay? Now, they said, hey, this is a problem. You said, hey, I think I'm gonna be able to fix it. You didn't say how yet. What you just said is, if I was able to do that, would you be in a position to move forward? What we're looking for them to do is say yes, okay? And if we repeat their problems back to them and say, well, if I can solve that, would you move forward? Yes. If I can solve this one, would you be in a position to move forward? Yes. And when they keep saying yes, 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 by the time you actually get to the point where you can offer your solution to them, at that point, it's very hard for them to say no, because they've been saying yes, yes, yes the whole way. Okay, so really good for positioning your position all the way at the start. Okay, now in doing this, one of the things that's going to make it really easy for them to feel comfortable in actually talking more openly and giving you more depth of conversations is for us to actually be a little bit of a chameleon and try and blend in and fit in their environment. Okay, so that fits in all sorts of ways. Okay, we want to understand I guess all of the non-verbal communication, so and also their verbal communication style. So there's the language style that they're using. So what are their keywords? Are they using the same catchphrases all the time? Are they using these big, long, 3 and 4 syllable words all the time? Or are they using very simple words? Do they keep using the same word over and over and over? What is their tonality? So is it upbeat? Is it slow and deliberate? So you want to try and match their tonality as they actually do this. You want to match their body language, okay? Their gestures, keep eye contact, but not too much eye contact, okay? You want to observe all of these things to see how and what is actually happening. As I said before, if you can match their dress sense by doing a little bit of homework up front, that makes them feel comfortable right at the get-go, okay? What is their level of confidence? If they're not confident, match that. And there's also a thing which is a personality profiling tool, or there's lots of personality profiling tools out there. So there's Myers-Briggs, there's DISC, there's, trying to think what some of the others are. There's, a couple of them have gone away, but I use one called DISC anyway. So DISC is really helpful, and I'll talk about DISC in a couple of moments, where firstly, you want to understand what your profile is, and then try and work out what their profile is, because that'll tell you how you can actually start to present some of your responses in there. So when we're matching and mirroring these people, we're trying to use their same words, we're trying to use their same sitting position. If they're leaning in, you lean in. If they're leaning back, you lean back. If they've got their arms crossed, you have your arms crossed. And what you want to try and do by mirroring them, and as they move in their chair, so if they move over here, then you're going to move over there as well. And after a while, if you've been mirroring them long enough, you'll be out, if you do the first move, if they follow you, and you lead and they follow, at that point, you know that they are feeling very comfortable with you, okay? It's a tried and tested sales technique to do the matching and mirroring, but that comes down to not just the seating position, but it's everything, your whole body language, the words that you use, the catchphrases that you use, plenty of things like that. Now, the other thing is understand their communication style. So there are 3 basic communication styles that most people are familiar with. So there's visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Okay, so visual, they might be using certain keywords that come out all the time. So I see what you're saying there. Okay, they might be using other words. So auditory, I hear what you're saying. Okay, let me see how that looks. Now that's going to start to give you some clues. So if they want to see things when they're using those sorts of words, then chances are they're going to want to see a visual map. So do drawings on the page and squiggles and things like that. Okay, and that's going to help massively to pick that out. So visual could be, I see what you mean, looks good to me, I get the picture. That looks right. Let me see if I understand. Okay. Those things are really, really key. Use those words back to them and use that as a clue to say, okay, I'm going to write that down. Sorry, I'm going to draw that for you. Okay. If they're auditory in style, then some of the language that they might use is, I hear you. That sounds good. That clicks. That rings a bell. Do you hear what I'm saying? When they say things like that, those little keywords are giving you massive tips. Now, in these instances, you want to be a lot more detail in your words, okay? Be a little bit more verbose. Be very descriptive in the language that you use. So don't draw the map, but instead draw a picture in their head with the words that you use. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put a 3.5 meter driveway down the left-hand side, and we're going to put a townhouse, really nice, architecturally designed, all the way at the back. We can start to talk very descriptively along those lines. And kinesthetic, they would use words like, that feels right. This is hard for me to grasp. I catch your drift. That really touches me. Those sorts of things, that's kinesthetic. It's all about the touchy-feely side of things. So when people are kinesthetic, sometimes it's okay to reach out and just touch their hand, or touch them on the shoulder or things like that, and make them feel at ease. But you have to always be very careful with those sorts of things. Okay. Some body language things, start paying attention to their eyes. So are their eyes darting around all the time? People will look, now there's myths as to, do they look up to the right or up to the left? Now, when they're thinking, what you want to do is actually work out, well, for this one particular person, do they look up to the left or do they look up to the right? And the way you do that is when you're having those early engagement conversation, when you talk about the kids and the family and all that sort of stuff, just the conversation starters, you're trying to baseline what is their norm. Okay. So if you can understand, give them a question that gets them to think and then observe where their eyes go, then you go, okay, well, if they're looking up and to the right, then that's where they look all the time when they're thinking, which means that when you're conversing with them and you're giving them a solution or giving them an offering and you see their eyes go up to the right, you want to give them thinking time. Okay. Now, are they darting around with their eyes? All sorts of things like that. Are they staring you back? What are some of the things that they're doing to you? So you also want to pay attention to their mouth. Are you seeing their lip quiver? Okay. Can you see a little, is it a very small smile? Is it a small grimace? Very minute little movements can be displayed very quickly, very easily, and give away a lot of things. Like a poker players are really good at reading people's body language, to say, okay, well, they're bluffing here or they're not bluffing. Okay. Their arms and legs, what are they doing? Okay, so are they closed off and, not really listening to what you're doing, or are they leaning in and paying attention and, hanging on every word that you're saying? All of those things are really important to be paying attention. Make sure you baseline that before you actually move, go into the detail of the deal. And then you know exactly what is their norm, because everyone's norm is slightly different, okay? Now, I touched on before the personality traits. So as I said before, I use the DISC profiling tool. So dominant, influential, steady, and compliant. And those different traits will give you some insights in how people respond to information, how people deal with under stress, what sort of level of detail do you need to go to? So for example, a dominant person, and I'm a dominant person on the DISC profiling tool, a dominant person is very decisive, okay? They're a doer. They're just going to go out and they need very little information. They're very high level thinkers, and they can make strategic thinking and just do it. Whereas someone on the opposite side of the spectrum would be steady. A steady person needs lots of detail. You need to go very slow for them. They need lots of time to actually absorb the information that you're giving them. They need lots of detail in the decision that you're giving them, so that they can actually feel confident that they've got all the information before they execute. Okay, so when you can start to understand your the person on the other side, then what you can start to do is present the detail in a way that they're actually going to be receptive to that. Now, remember before I said, right at the very start, I said, do all your homework up front, okay? So all about the site and all about what you're prepared to offer and all of those sorts of things, you do that before you walk in. And then when you're sitting at the table, you understand, okay, where do they sit on this DISC personality profile? Are they D, I, S, or C? And based on that, you go, okay, now I'm either going to give them a bucket load of information on that deal. These are all the comparative sales in the area, and Joe down the street got this, and Mary up the road got that, and or you just keep it very strategic and very high level because that's what they're after, or do you need to go somewhere in between? Though that's really key to actually understanding how that actually works. Now, when you understand what their profile is, there are very specific do's and don'ts that you can do to trigger those. So a dominant person, because they are very, decision orientated and very strategic and that sort of thing, you don't want to ramble or waste their time, okay? They're less interested in personal stuff, okay? So if you start rabbiting on too much about the personal stuff, you'll just kind of lose them, okay? Whereas an influential person, they love to socialize and things like that. So they're going to love to take that extra time to talk about the personal things. And what they don't want is to be cut off, okay? They don't want to be talked down to. So when they are talking to you, give them the space to talk it out, okay? Don't jump in over the top of them and go, yeah, but, okay? A steady person, these people, they like, again, to connect personally, that they need the time to break the ice. You'd have to be very genuine and sincere and show interest in everything they are. You need to be very patient with them because they need plenty of time to absorb. Do not ever rush them, okay? You need to give them time. Sometimes that means going away and coming back. That's the sort of amount of time that you might need to give them, okay? Don't force them into change too quick, okay? They're going to really want to take their time, make sure that they've actually dotted every I and crossed every T and that sort of thing, okay? Compliant people, these guys just want the facts, okay? So you've got to give them the facts. You've got to be very logical. You've got to stick to an agenda, and you've got to discuss every single option. If there are 3 or 4 different permutations of doing things, they want to know the lot, and they want to know every bit of detail in doing that. So don't be disorganized. Don't come in unprepared for somebody like that, because they're just going to spot that and go, this guy's got no idea, okay? Don't try to force a quick decision because they need to know that they've actually gathered all the data, and so you need to demonstrate to them that you actually have done that. So these profiling tools, whether you do DISC like I do, whether you do Myers-Briggs, whether you do any of the other ones out there, and there are plenty of them out there, they will all have ways for you to actually understand how to read the personality profile of the person opposite you on the table, and be able to give you some tips and tricks and do's and don'ts as to how to actually deal with them. Okay. Now, at the point where you've gathered all their needs and drivers, you've got their fears, pains, and desires, that sort of thing. You understand what's going on. You've worked out the mannerisms that you're talking. You know, are you doing it visually and all that sort of stuff? Now it's actually time to start brokering the deal. Okay, so because you were prepared, you're coming in. You're going to start, I guess, placing your offer to them in a way that repeats everything that you captured earlier on. Okay, so you said that you're really interested in getting maximum price for this opportunity. If I could give you a deal that gave you maximum price, would that help you out? Fantastic. So you indicated also that you haven't yet decided where you want to move to, so which means that you can be quite flexible on time. That's advantageous to me. That means that I can save a whole bunch of holding costs, and what I'd be prepared to do is pass those holding costs back to you. Would that be of interest if you could give me a little bit of time, and Ion Exchange could give you a little bit more money? If that was the case, would you be in a position to move forward? Make sure that you keep asking. Firstly, you repeated their pain point. Secondly, you're saying, if I can give you a problem that solves it. And thirdly, would you be in a position to move forward? And you'll get yes, yes, yes. And then when you actually get to the point of making the offer, then hopefully you've addressed all of their issues and challenges up front. Okay. Now, there will always be a little bit of haggle, and it's really important to understand that as humans, we need to feel like we've gotten a deal. Okay. So if you know what the exact answer is that they're looking for, and you're prepared to do it, if you lead with that first go and go, this is exactly what you want, so I'm going to give you that. As humans, we kind of feel, oh, that was too easy. That, like, he must have had more money on the table, or so there needs to be a tussle. Okay, there needs to be a little bit of a tussle. So make sure that you have something on the table that might not necessarily be 100% ideal, but you're prepared to sacrifice. So give small concessions. Okay, but make sure when you do, you give it up unwillingly. Oh, like, that was really important to me, but you know, I understand where you're going from. But every time you give something up, when you make a concession of some description, make sure you receive something in return. Okay, so if they've got a particular thing that you've given up, so maybe you're prepared for a 6-month delayed settlement. So you might lead with, I'd really like 12-month delayed settlement. Okay, so in doing so, they'll say, look, I can only do 6. That's all I've got. So you go, look, I was really hoping that I could pass you more money and that sort of thing in that process. So if we can only do 6, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to pay you as much because I won't have as many of the savings that we're actually talking about. Okay. So every time there's something that you sacrifice, make sure that you've got something that you can actually get in return. Okay. That tussle is really important. Now, you don't want to make the tussle too hard. You want to make it just right so that everyone feels like they had a fair battle. Okay, that's the key thing to actually take away. Assuming we've done all of that right, the best thing that we can do from there is then do a heads of agreement. Okay, so heads of agreement is it's not a legally binding document, but it is a document that allows you to recap and simplify everything that you were actually discussing. It allows you to, I guess, get both parties emotionally invested. Okay, so get both parties to actually sign it. So it'll say, look, this is the deposit, this is the due diligence period, this is the settlement date, these are the terms, these are the discussion points that we actually had, and just write it out in front of them, and both parties actually sign. And that what you do is you then take that heads of agreement, you say, look, this is what we've agreed to on the terms today. I will now take this to my solicitor and we can draw that up legally. Okay, that means that you'll be able to say, well, now that my solicitor knows exactly what we've agreed, it's going to be simpler for the process. It's going to be cheaper for both of us. We're not going to have all these delays. Would you be interested in that approach? And 99% of the time they will actually say yes. So you give that heads of agreement to your solicitor, they'll draw it up. And then when the contract comes back, make sure you've got the heads of agreement with you. Sit down with them and say, look, this is what we wrote in the heads of agreement, and this is where it actually says that in the contract. You can see they've put it in legalese, but you know, if you're okay, pretty much understand that we're trying to get the same thing. Because when they take that contract to their solicitor is going to want to tear it apart, because that's what they do. They make money by making, I guess, adjustments to contracts. And so when their solicitor comes back, you go, well, yes, but we agreed on our heads of agreement that that's the terms that you actually wanted, and that just happens to be the legal speak. So now all we're doing is doing very, very minor tweaks to the little wording of it rather than the intent, okay, which is super critical and super important to the process. So there you have it, folks. Hopefully that was a good insight into, I guess, how to start your negotiations, how to capture the needs of your vendor and actually start to present those back to them in ways that they're going to find super killer for them and ways to actually solve their problems, okay? Now, I guess the thing to remember when doing this, there is every now and then we'll capture all of those needs and it doesn't suit our particular circumstances. Well, here's the thing. You found a killer deal. You've just negotiated terms. The terms may not suit you, but you're in a network of more than 10,000 other property developers, and almost certainly somebody will actually be interested in that deal if it truly is a killer deal and you already know what the terms are. So don't be afraid to flick it on for a finder's fee, even if it doesn't suit your needs. Go all the way through to the end of the process. Don't cut out halfway. As soon as you go, oh, it doesn't suit me, and run away, run for the hills. Take it through to a natural conclusion, flick it off to a finder's fee. Somebody will be very grateful for the experience and happily pay you that finder's fee. So there you have it, folks. That's our Sunday session for today. A reminder that we do Sunday sessions every Sunday, or almost every Sunday, at 5 p.m. Brisbane time, which will obviously change I guess around Australia, depending upon where you're physically located. If you want to participate in these, then go to our Facebook group, facebook.com/Property Developer Network, like the page, and every single time I go live, you will see the alerts. Also a reminder that we have a couple of Facebook communities, which is our Property Developer Network group, and that's where you can continue your property journey, ask questions of the community, and the community will try to help you out as you go. And we also have the development site Deal Hub group, which is the perfect place to flick that deal if you negotiated those terms and it didn't suit you. We've got thousands of developers on there looking for deals all day, every day. So if that's of interest, folks, would love to see you in those communities. We also run our meetup events all the way around the country. I don't have a slide on that, but if you go to our website, go to events, you can come to our physical events, which now that COVID is slowing down and borders are opening back up again, we're back to running physically again. So we've got the Brisbane one was just yesterday, and we've got Sydney and Melbourne coming up for the first physical event for quite some time. So looking forward to seeing you all there. And if anyone have any interest at all in our education programs, we do have our property development formula program for those of you who are actually interested in that. So I'll just leave that at that. Now what I'm going to do is go to the audience, see if there's any questions from anyone. And if I can find where Facebook has gone, that will mean I can actually grab the what's happening. So see if we can find some questions from you guys. Give me 2 secs while I load that up. Okay, here come the questions. Okay, so bucket load of them. Just allow me a sec to get that on this screen in front of me because it's really hard to follow. Lots of people saying hi. So hello, everybody. I won't go naming, but there is a ton of them out there. So Vanessa's got a question. So what about if the gatekeeper is an agent? What are good ways to get in front of the owner? Fantastic question, Vanessa. And you're going to apply all of these tactics that I just touched on with the agent in order to understand what are their fears, pains, and desires. And when you understand what they are, remember, anytime an agent is involved, it is no longer a two-way negotiation, it is now a three-way negotiation. You need to make the agent happy in order for them to represent you well in with the vendor. So the most likely, I guess, fears, pains, and desires are all around the fact that they want certainty on their agent commission and when that agent commission is going to come through. So now, if they're a brand spanking new agent, haven't been in the industry for very long, they haven't got many sales in the pipeline, they are probably super hungry for their comms, and they want to know that that you're going to do some short, sharp terms that's going to get them an agent commission as soon as humanly possible, because they need to put food on the table. Okay. Whereas if an agent has been around for 10 years or so, you know, they're doing deals all the time. They might be a little bit more flexible in when they receive their commission, if they can get a little bit more, or if you can give them opportunities to maybe sell the finished product or, you know, things like that, because anything that you are buying, you're going to be selling later on multiples of something. Okay. If you're doing a 6-pack, that's 6 brand new townhouses that you're going to be selling. So, you know, when you understand the fear, pain, and desire of that agent based on their experience and where they are on their journey, you will be able to present your solution to them to say, well, if we made sure that we looked after you in this transaction, and I think this is how we can actually make sure that you're looked after, would you be prepared to represent us well in with the vendor? Because what we're really looking for is a delayed settlement with early access, which means that typically that's going to be a delayed commission for you. So if you need the commission up front, perhaps we just make the deposit a little larger and release that early. Or alternatively, if they don't need the commission up front, maybe what we do is to say, well, you're going to wait 12 months for it, but by that time the project will be nearly finished. And we'll be in a position where we'll be selling the finished product at that point. Would you like some of those listings on the finished product? And so now they're getting the delayed gratification, but on top of that, they're getting some extra comms for the sale of the next one coming through. So hopefully that helps. And okay, we've got, Daniel's got a question. On the first meeting, would my main goal to confirm to confirm they're a seller, or do all the DD as soon as you get the call? On the first call, Daniel, depending upon how you've actually engaged with them, you know, did you do a letterbox drop, or did you do we always want to make sure that we're actually in the right ballpark and that they're I guess, genuine in the process. That's a little bit difficult to do in detail without giving away your answer. Okay. Remember, I said don't negotiate on the phone. But what I typically do is if it's a response to one of my letters, typically what I would do is say, look, I'm not in the office at the moment, so I'd need to do, you know, look up your particular property. But what I do know is that the median price in the area is X. I also know that the way that we do business, we can be quite flexible in our terms, which means that sometimes we can pay above market rates. So, you know, if we're there or thereabouts, would you be interested in having a chat to see how we can work with you to actually get a deal done? And if you've got a positive response from that, you've not actually given them an exact price, but you've given them a range, and you know that you're somewhere in the range. Okay, so that's how I'd try to deal with that. Now there's a couple of people going back and forth with chats between themselves, so I'm going to leave that to those guys. Sean's talking about a Ouija board. I'm clearly missing some comments here, and I don't know why. Let me see if I can get Facebook to convince me to show all the comments. Okay, so Adam says, what do you do when both decision makers, husband and wife, are not on the meeting, and how would you politely postpone? So I'm going to say that, Adam, in most instances, one will be the primary decision maker, and one will be the, I guess the influencer. There's generally, there is one key decision maker. That is the person that you really, really want, and the other person's the influencer. I don't have a specific to deal with that particular one, but you're going to have to go with the flow on the conversation that's happening at the time, and just say, look, really keen to actually move forward. I've actually got a couple of other projects that I'm looking at right now. If you're not in a position to move forward, maybe we come back to this in a month or two's time if those fall over, because this is my living. I need to actually do a project, otherwise I don't put food on the table. So if you can't meet, then there's probably no deal to be had at this point in time. That will genuinely get to the point to say, well, okay, well, if there is no deal, then I'm going to run away. That tells you whether or not they're actually serious. Or they'll go, okay, got it. I respect and understand that you're a businessman. This is what you do for a living, and we'll do what we can. But make sure you're also flexible in how and where you meet them as well, so that you can, if they're only available at certain hours, or maybe one of them's a shift worker, those sorts of things. Be very flexible in how and where you actually meet them up. Okay, so it is very clear looking at some of these comments here that there is some extra comments that I physically just am not seeing. So I don't know what is happening here with Facebook, but because I can see some people responding to other people, but I can't see the first question. So my humble apologies, guys, if I miss a question. So Vicky's got a question. I love dealing with the vendor and learning all about their story so you can create a win-win for everyone. When you come from a place of integrity and understand their pain, they respect your opinion when negotiating on behalf of the purchaser. Absolutely, Vicky. I could not agree 100%. Sorry, couldn't agree more. So 100% agree with that. You need to have integrity. You need to be willing to treat them as, I guess, a genuine person. This is really a people business, and we just happen to transact property. So now that said, Sean says Maslow helps simplify many, many things. Absolutely he does, mate. So again, some questions between each other. So Adam talking to Matt and Matt talking to Adam, and Adam replying to Vicky. So I'm just going to leave those. I'll just look for the questions themselves. So Erin says, do you find out their price range before you sit down with them? E.g., figure out you're in the right ballpark, or just go straight into the meeting first and figure it out along the way? Sometimes I've found out the vendor wants way more than market price. I think I touched on that answer a little bit before, Erin, when I answered about 5 minutes ago. But yes, I would generally go, even if I'm in the office, I will genuinely say, hey, I'm not in the office right now, but so I can't give you the exact number that I'm looking at for your property, but I do know the range that the area is in, and make sure that they're in that ballpark, okay? Give them the insights to say, look, I'm able to pay above market price from time to time if we can negotiate the right terms. That's mutually beneficial to both of us. But don't give them a this is it. You might be able to say it could be anywhere from 5 to 15% uplift on your price point, depending upon the terms you're able to give me, for example. Okay, that gives them a nice range to go, okay, got it. I know what the market is. I'm close to the market. My expectations aren't too high. I'm within that 5 to 15%. I wonder what he needs to make that happen. Okay. Sammy says, thank you, very informative. You're more than welcome. So does Ursula and Karine and a couple of others. So I'm just going to say thank you. Liana says, hi, Rob. What if after you negotiate terms, they then want to go away and think about it? How would you leave the conversation and follow up? That's what the heads of agreement is really for, Liana, is to say, look, this is the heads of agreement that we've agreed to today. If you like, just make sure that we actually are in agreement that that's what we agree. Get them to sign it so they're emotionally invested in it. but say, look, I just won't take this to the solicitor until you've had a think about it. But I'm going to give you a timeline for that. I've got, I'll give you to the end of the week, for example, because I need to move on. Okay, so I don't want to rush you, but at the same time, I need to actually do a deal because that's my living. Okay, so you're giving them a little bit of time pressure without actually smashing them on that, and you're also leaving them with the heads of agreement. If they are not willing to sign it, at least actually give them a copy of it and say, look, this is what we discussed today. So it becomes like minutes of the meeting, very worthwhile to actually leave with them, but just give them a deadline. Lots of other people saying thank you. So Trent, John, and etc. and Sean as well, Bernard as well. So thank you all, folks. Kerry says, is there a template for heads of agreement? Kerry, yes, there is, but we only give that to our property development formula students. So more than happy to have a chat to you about that. But it's very simplistic, to be honest. It's really capturing the main criteria that you need for almost every single deal. So that is the purchase price, the deposit, the settlement timelines, what your due diligence period is, how long you need for finance. So those things are going to be mandatory on every single one. And then everything below is then the kinds of things that you may want in that deal. So, and that will be very deal specific. So you've captured their fears, pains, and desires. So there's going to be a lot of those actually sitting on here. We're going to pay you above market rate by holding the savings cost in the project and passing that back to you at the tail end. So you're going to capture that, those sorts of things in there. So you're kind of building that within the project itself. If you need things like early access to the property in order to do some works, those sorts of things, you might have 3 or 4 of those pre-canned up, and then you just go, does it apply? Yes, no, and have a little ticker box. I got several of those that we have on our template. It's relatively simple to actually create those. So hopefully that helps. But yes, we do give it to our students if you are interested in that regard. Facebook has been quite glitchy here. Okay, sorry that's the case, Sean. My humble apologies, mate. I'm not sure if it's my end or your end, but hopefully the recording comes through and you can actually watch that. Peter says, Rob, can I confirm if you're going to have a live Melbourne meeting in February? Peter, 95% chance on that. So we have the venue booked, we have the presenters booked, we have the flights and accommodation booked. All of that is the case. We received notification yesterday that Premier Andrews is relaxing Brisbane as a hot spot. What we have to do is wait for the official release to see whether or not that means that we can actually travel. So fairly confident it's going to go live, mate. We will do formal announcements on that Monday or Tuesday once we know exactly whether or not we're actually allowed in. Unfortunately, we have to flex with these times, mate, but yeah, very keen to get down there after such an extended period away. So, okay, lots of other people just saying great sessions. So that said, folks, I'm going to say thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Once again, as always, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Sunday session next week. And until then, bye for now.